Hello and welcome to Tear Down These Walls podcast. Here we tear down the walls of silence, shame, and stigma, one story at a time. And for episode 18, it's going to be another solo one today. I did have a girl that was going to sit with me, but look, things change and people have other obligations to fill. So I decided, will I skip a week and just leave it be? Or will I talk about something that's been used a lot lately and has me thinking a lot about, is this it or am I just busy? So I start, and then a couple of things popped up for me that I read, and I thought, you know what, I'll have a conversation about burnout today. And I suppose I read this article, and it's off a behavioural psychologist called Lena Hoffman, and she studies people with self-improvement, healing and personal growth. And what she discovered, it was really, really interesting and really made me think a lot about where I'm at and what things were like. And a lot of people saying, are you doing too much, Lisa? You're going to burn yourself out, Lisa. And these are people with just genuine concerns. And then I start questioning myself, am I okay? Am I burning out? Am I going to burn out? Or am I just busy and being productive and trying to get well and healing and all those other buzzwords that we use when we're on some sort of a journey of self-discovery? But what this girl, Lena Hoffman, suggested in the piece of research, or what she found in the piece of research, should I say, was beneath all this growth, she discovered the same emotional pattern repeating again and again. And she called that restless avoidance. And that really stuck out with me. And I'll explain why. So when I was in addiction, burnout would have been an understatement. And I'm not sure how we wake up every day and continue the things that we do. And I know a lot of people who have suffered in addiction will understand this. Burnout, I don't think I'll ever forget what it feels like or what it felt like. It is just a cycle of doing but getting nowhere. It's like punching the one spot over and over again and not even making a dent in the spot. You're so tired, and a lot of people talk about this at the end, that you're really only thinking of an exit plan because you're so exhausted and so burned out. I mean, every department, I've discussed this before, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, there is nothing in the tank. And that for me is my experience of real burnout. And it made me think then when she used this restless avoidance, because yes, in the past I was absolutely restless. And was I avoiding? There's nothing surer. It didn't matter how much I walked, how much I talked, how much I did or done. It doesn't get you anywhere when you're in a cycle of addiction. And then she went on, so she calls it, she's obviously German, and she calls it the Berlin paradox. And she went on to say the healthiest people aren't the ones who heal the most. They're the ones who finally stop seeing themselves as broken. And that landed with me too. So it made me really think about where I am right now. She goes on and calls it this the core paradox. The more one tries to become their best self, the further they drift from their real self. So you can see why this would have you thinking when you're in recovery and everything you believe you're doing is productive and it's part of your healing journey and it's part of getting well. And she also then, there's another part, healing versus running. Many healers are self-improvers and not chasing people, rather running from emotional stillness. And she talks about the conditional self, fixing ourselves to feel self-worth. So it really made me think about everything I'm doing and all the people who are of concern, talking about, am I doing too much? You're going to burn yourself out. And I had to really ask myself the question and then figure out what is burnout for me, because burnout can be a lot of things for different people. I should actually add the solution that she came up with. So she says, through her research, true peace comes not from endless self-repair, but from stopping the running and accepting that one is not broken by design. Now, there's a lot in that, and there's a lot that I could sort of contradict, and there's a lot that I could agree with, just through my own personal experience, because as all the podcasts, I'm not here to give expert advice. I'm only here to give my own personal experience of the topics that I have experienced throughout my life that I discuss with people on this podcast. So, having read the bit about Lena Hoffman and her research, it really made me think and reflect on my own life. And what came up for me was, when we come out of addiction, are we swapping one addiction for another? Are we chasing those highs through self-discovery? And what that can look like, I suppose, for me in the past 4 years would be the running, the walking, the college material, all of these things that I can do quite excessively. And once I start something I really like, I'm looking for that hit, that dopamine hit. I've got such a great feeling from this. I want more of it. So I can really, really and truly understand why people do say to a lot of addicts. And I've saw a lot of things out there on TikTok and people who are doing fantastic work on themselves and in their communities. And they have raised these concerns in people, passing remarks about swapping addiction and burning themselves out. And what I will say about my own experience is the burnout that I may be feeling, and I don't even know whether I am feeling, but there's so many people saying this, and the reason why I said I talk about it is because it's left me confused and questioning myself and the things that I'm doing. But what I do know for sure, Oprah Winfrey has a fantastic book about what she knows for sure, and I love it. It's a really small book, and it's just through her own personal experience and what she knows for sure through her experience. So I have stolen that from her. What I know for sure, regardless of what I'm doing right now in all the areas of my life, in exercise, in academia, in these podcasts, which I love doing, sitting and speaking with people, in the voluntary work that I do for addiction, an addiction centre, is I would take this burnout any day of any year for the rest of my life over the burnout that I experienced when I was in addiction, when I was totally numbing out. When that type of burnout led you to a place where the only way out felt like exiting this world. So this is what I know for sure, is there has been little whispers in myself So I think for each person, for every individual, they gotta look in and they gotta bring it back to themselves, because there are people who notice things before we do, and particularly family members and friends, and they might see, that she sounds tired, she doesn't look great. And actually, I know I'm going off here, but it's not scripted. I've tried to script things before and it just doesn't work for me. I sound like a robot. So last year at the end of my college term, and two of my modules was addiction and grief. And they would be, I would say, monsters in my life. And these monsters do happen to teach us a lot in life. I actually don't know who I would be without the grief or without the addiction. That's a podcast for another day. But I was just coming to the end of term and I invited everybody down for a beach day. And I was stretched, let's say. And yes, they were heavy subjects, and we have to do a lot of personal therapy. There's a lot of add-ons in this type of degree, and it's the one degree that I would say involves a lot of personal reflection and a lot of work on yourself. I mean, how can you become a therapist and sit with people if you can't sit with your own stuff? If you ask me, it's impossible. So these are all part of the degree course. But I invited everybody down and they all came down to the beach, and I woke up early that morning and I set up a nice spot in a little cove on North Beach in Rush, and I put all the chairs out. And again, everybody got down to me that day. I was extremely quiet, which would be very unlike me. And I just started to sit and I was, enjoying this around and happy to have my family. But I got a phone call off my mother that evening and she says, "Are you okay?" And my brother had rang her and says, "Lisa is very quiet. She doesn't seem great." And the truth being, I was burned out. I was extremely tired, and from all the work I was doing in personal therapy and from the topics in college, that was extremely heavy, and I had no choice but to self-reflect on this. I started to get, we all have a bit of anxiety, but I started to get the anxiety that I had while I was in addiction, where it was sort of debilitating. And I think a couple of weeks after that beach day, I got really sick and work and had to take 2 weeks off with a couple of infections. And I also had to go to a local GP who was not my GP, but I went into that much of a bad panic attack. And for anyone that knows about panic attacks, you can go into these spasms where you can lose the ability to speak and you can lose the ability to use your hands or to move. That would be what I would consider a really severe one. So thankfully that day there was a local GP that offered his help out of hours and was able to talk to me and calm me down and reassure me that I wasn't dying or having a stroke, which is what it feels like. And the reason why I share this is because at that time, family members was noticing that there was a shift in me. And also at that time, I would have been probably walking the 40,000 steps a day. I'd have been waking extremely early in the morning, like 4:30, 5:00. And this was my body and my mind telling me that, there was too much going on. And that was all this stuff that I'm telling you about, the stuff that I felt I needed to do. That was part of my degree. If I want to complete these degrees, these are the things I have to do. But then we have all the other stuff. We have our children and they can be going through big issues, which one of my children is going through a lot of stuff. And also, they're just living day to day. They're cleaning the house, they're making the dinners, the finances, which is a real struggle. And I know people will be able to recognize this. Any single parent and any person who is working minimum wage jobs to live at the minute is extremely difficult. So you add all that onto all the other stuff, and I would say that probably equals burnout. Still, I will say the burnout I had last year and the feelings that I had and the anxiety and the panic attacks was absolutely nothing like the ones that I experienced when I was in the throes of addiction. So I think it's not advice, but it's the question. What is burnout and when do I know that I'm experiencing it? On reflection, I would definitely say last year that was burnout. But then it got me thinking, when we come out of addiction and are living the wrong way most of our lives. When I say the wrong way, I mean not being able to hold down a job, living a criminal life, living in addiction. And when we enter out of that, so the best way of explaining it is on the first day of walking out of Asheray back in 2021, you have 4 weeks sobriety, but you are a little bit clearer, but you are absolutely full of fear. You're going back to a house of fractured relationships, of massive debts that you've allowed to accumulate because you couldn't pay the normal bills. No job, no education, and no partner to help pick up the pieces. And I don't know how when life is that broken for one person, for a family, how do you not have to work really hard? The point I'm trying to say, I'm trying to get it in my head is, how would you not have a busy life right now when every area needs to be worked on? The whole world is looking for balance, but how does a person who has to work, who didn't work for a long time, a person who is uneducated has to go back to school, a person in poverty, I've just said that, needs to go out and work, a person who is coming out of addiction needs to run a program. They need to go to meetings, they need to get a sponsor. So a lot of these things was unavoidable. A lot of these things I felt I had to do. And I know, and I really, really would love feedback on this one. I know there are so many people out there who has had similar struggles and continues to have them. I walked out a day extremely unhealthy. Like, I was extremely thin. The first probably proper meals I had, 3 meals a day, was in Asheray. So I had to go out and make sure that I was going to get healthy again, food-wise. Exercise was never an issue. I could just be excessive at that. I always continued to walk, even in my addiction. I had to get a job. I really wanted to go back to school. And the push for that was all the jobs that I then got, which was minimum wage because I'm not qualified. I literally was getting so depressed in them. I hated most of them that I was in. I met lovely people. But I remember sitting in a cafeteria one day. I was doing, they called it, I don't know what the title was, but it was more KP work. And I was after washing, I don't know how many large pots and doing all that manual work that you do when you're not qualified in anything. And I remember sitting in the cafeteria and looking out the window, and I remember saying to myself, if I continue to do this type of work for the rest of my life. I will probably end up back drinking, or I will be one of those bitter women in my 60s. I can't do this for the rest of my life. And believe me, I take my hat off to the women and the men who's able to do these jobs. I wish I was one of them that got satisfaction and was happy-go-lucky in doing work like that, but it wasn't for me. I I I needed to go back and use my head, and I needed to go back and get educated. It was always a goal of mine. So in saying that, how do you split your time? How do you split your days when you got to start from scratch? You got to get healthy. You got to exercise. You got to eat well. You're a single parent. You got to go to work. You got to run the house, and you got to, out of choice, go back to school. But for me, it didn't really feel like choice. It was something I really had to do. So I'm not quite sure how somebody, and please, all the women out there, could not have burnout. You know, I think it's very difficult to not have it. And do I fully accept responsibility on why my life is the way it is today? Absolutely. I mean, I don't take the responsibility for the socio-economic background that we're born into. And that comes with its own set of problems, like poverty and criminality and lack of education. But I suppose I had to take responsibility for what I wanted to do in my life as a then 39-year-old woman. I'm walking out the doors of Ashery. So I decided, as I've said in previous podcasts, that I would make a change and take responsibility and try and set up a good life for myself. And I knew it would require a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of endurance, a lot of resilience. But I knew I had all these things. I knew from all the things that I went through, if I had all that energy to give to living a shitty life, well, why can't I have all that energy to live a good one? So the question I suppose I have to ask myself, and I think we all do, when we hear those little whispers, instead of waiting till it's a big roar, a big loud voice for burnout. So now, now after I have a damaged hip, I was running 5 kilometers every morning and walking after work, and also doing a little weight session after I ran the 5K. And I heard the little whispers inside. I heard, the little niggle on the hip and the tired arms and shoulders. And this is where, that addictive sort of way of being can still hindrance us in recovery. I kept going. I kept lifting those weights, I kept running, and I waited until there was the roar. And now I can't even get out of the car because my hip is not working properly, or it feels like there's 2 dead weights on my shoulders, or my toes are holding me going to sleep at night. So what I am trying to do now, this is a real struggle for me, is go with the little whispers and stop waiting for the big roar, Lisa. I had a few months off from November till this week, actually, of running, because I couldn't. I disabled myself. It's funny, as I'm saying that, I think about, how much of that person is still in there. I can still, in my recovery and living a better life, disable myself and do way too much because it's that chase, it's that looking for. And I actually do want to talk about the sort of walking and the excessive running, because I did see a little bit about that. And I hope running with Chris, getting better with Chris. Won't mind me saying this, but I know he has spoke a bit about it on his podcast, and I really enjoyed listening to him, giving his body a break. And um, you know, I think for people who has had a lot of trauma and who is living in addiction, when we come out of it, we've so much adrenaline and fuel and so much to process that it's too much for us to just sit still at the beginning. We got to keep moving, wherever that may be, and that's why people say we transfer one addiction to another. It's because I remember actually my partner then saying to me, he was saying to somebody that I was running 5K a day and saying how much I walked. And the person said to him, "Is she an addict?" And he obviously said, "Yeah, how do you know?" And the guy that said it to him said, "That's what they all do." And, all these little vices and all these people who says these one-liners, you have to start questioning it for yourself. I mean, you could just ignore it, but there is a bit of truth in it. For me anyway, we we are still quite excessive people, and that's why we have programs. I was always trying to get something out of myself, like to rid myself of whatever was in there. And I think that's why the power walking and the running helped. But what I realised having the break from November till now, I could fucking run for the rest of my life 20 kilometres a day and walk another 20 in one day. And yes, it helps, but it's never going to get rid of that emotional stuff that I've been carrying around with me for my whole life. And I know that because for the last few years, I've done that much. My Fitbit, your Fitbit tells you, I think I've walked to the core of the earth or something like that. And still, I, it never goes away, this stuff that we hold inside. And I know I don't have to explain that because people will know what I'm talking about. We get better at living with it, and we end up with better tools to be able to deal with it. The break I had from November till this week, anytime I used to take time off walking or running, I would have, or if I couldn't do it because I was sick or because I had other engagements on, or if I had a busy day, and I would be checking the time and trying to get out and tripping over myself to get the running to walk in. And I don't know what came over me over the Christmas period, but I thought about hibernation and what some animals do. And at winter time, they stock up and they stay inside and they rest. Rest was the word. And for me, rest would be just going to bed at night. That's my rest. But I was really able to rest for a few months. I was made a few changes to my life and decisions I had to make, which helped. But I was able to sit guilt-free without getting up in the morning and running, and without going on that evening walk, and just I think it's probably for the first time in my life I was able to listen to my body. And well, my poor hip was screaming at me, so I'd no choice to listen to her. But I really, really, really enjoyed it. And I suppose I usually would worry about putting on the pounds and, oh God, I don't want to get any bigger. I like wearing certain clothes, and if I get, and all this stuff that us women go through. And I was still doing walks, but nothing like, a stroll around the park with the dog, and not that power walking that I do. And it's not that I want to give up running completely or exercising. I do think it's really important, especially for us girls in our 40s. But it's finding a balance. and having guilt-free rest and sitting on the sofa and having that croissant and having that takeaway once a week and being able to live. So as much as this podcast is about started with burnout, I suppose it could also be with balance and finding balance, and especially people who live with the conditions that I live with, which is excessiveness and addiction and always trying to be better, because if I'm better, someone might love me more, or someone might give me that pat on the head and tell me how great I am. So I'm trying to learn to be happy with what I have today and who I am today, without having to prove so much to myself and to the people around me. And as I said, this whole burnout question and thought process has brought up so much for me, and you can see where everything sort of ties in. Yeah, I suppose I will go back to, again, the two types of burnout that we can experience in our life. And at the moment, I am really not feeling like I am burned out. But I have questioned it, because when more than one person says the same thing to you, well, you got to look at it, don't you? You got to ask yourself the question. And I had been planning on taking a back seat on a couple of the things that I do in my life, and I have managed to do one of them, which hopefully someday that I can return to. And I'm hoping I have a new plan for myself exercise-wise to. My hip is feeling a lot better, although there's a little bit of a thing back in it again after I've run twice this week. So I'm going to try just run 3 days a week, and 2 days a week do a light bit of weightlifting, and the weekends keep free. Actually, yoga has been very, very good for me, because it's, as I said, movement. Movement is so, so important. I do not know what or where I'd be without the ability to be able to move. And we can take it for granted. Every night when I'm actually doing my prayers, I thank God for the ability to move, because it is so important. But I think we can be quite excessive with it, which can lead to burnout, physical burnout and emotional burnout, mental burnout. So I am going to try to run for 3 days, 2 days weightlift, and then Saturdays I will keep it open for a bit of yoga. As I said there, I started to say, because it's such a slow movement, yoga, I really felt the benefits of it. There's something in it, and another book I'll talk about. A guy wrote a book about yoga, and I believe meditation combined. I can see you here now, Michelle. Yoga and the quest for the true self. I haven't read it yet, but it's on my list. I'm a bit behind on my reading. Yeah, at the moment, so sorry, I get back. I'm losing my train of thought. I always find these solo ones a little bit difficult to navigate, and can sometimes get a bit of a mental block on where I'm at or what I'm trying to say. Well, I did do a self-check-in, and as I said, I have been able to make a few changes to free up an evening or two a week, which is really important. My sleep is really good at the minute. I'm sleeping. If I can get 8 hours, I get the 8 hours and I sleep. It's not always possible. If I have stuff on in the evening, I'm up early every morning. My eating is good. I, like a lot of addicts, have to watch the sugar intake as well as the excessive exercise. So I try to keep it for the weekends. I had a good run at Christmas um, with the sugar and the treats. So I do try to curb it because I can be absolutely excessive on that, and it has its own health problems. Um, I feel I'm taking deeper breaths than I was a few months back. Anyone that suffers or struggles with anxiety will tell you that your breath can get caught in your throat and you can't get it down to the belly. And that in itself can cause anxiety and panic. So I don't feel like right now that I'm in burnout mode, but it is just the beginning of my academic year. So I'll check in as the months go by. But as I always say, talking about it and sharing your experience helps, and having children who point things out to you. My daughter is fantastic for pointing out when I'm doing too much. Like, I'll share a couple of funny stories about over Christmas I recorded, I think it was 4 podcasts I had waiting to be released, and I was getting, really excited, and the dopamine hits about getting all these podcasts done. I was so excited to release them, and I was like, shall I do 2 a week? And Carla just gives me this look as if to say, here we go again. No, 1 is plenty. We don't want to overload people, the heavy subjects, the heavy topics that people is talking about. The hiking group, when I decided that this would be really good to have for people, because I know what nature and what the mountains has done for me over the years. But I wanted to, the minute I said I do one, I wanted to do one that week and get a group together, and maybe even if 3 or 4 people. And like that, I got the look off Carla. It's too soon. Why don't you just put it out there and let people have a think about it? And I think, like, she's half the age of me and the wisdom she has. And yeah, she is definitely, she doesn't suffer from the same things, thank God, that I suffer from. But she is a fantastic voice for me to have in my life, and steers me in the right direction when I'm going into crazy modes. The last job that I had, when I was going through that bit of burnout that I described, with anxiety and panic, and I was coming home from work crying. It was a really tough job. It was only 3 hours a day, but they were the longest 3 hours. And I was coming home. I got sick for 2 weeks at the end of that working year, and I remember saying to me, why are you doing that type of work? Why? And I said, because I'm well able for it. And, and in other words, I was telling her, I'm really tough, I'm really strong, I'm really resilient, and I can do this. And she says, but you can't. You clearly can't. It's breaking you. You're coming home and you're crying, you're getting upset. And it was a combination of a lot of things. It wasn't just a job. But again, and I had that light bulb moment, and I was like, why am I doing this? Why don't I find a job that's easier and not as challenging and tough? Because the type of jobs I get, I'll pay their own money at the minute, so it's definitely at the minute not about the money. But I laugh because we can be so tough on ourselves. And we're all human, and we're all tough on ourselves, and we're all excessive in some departments, whether it's eating, running, talking, relationships. I mean, you name it, we're human beings. We're all going to struggle and suffer. But the things I suffer from, I know a lot of people in addiction suffer from too. And I know they're all trying to find balance. And I think for us, we've always had this massive amount of adrenaline and energy as children, as teenagers. And we put it into taking drugs, living hard, living fast, living noisy, living in chaos. And when we come out of that chaos and madness of living fast in that fast lane, when we come out of that, we still have all this energy and all this adrenaline. And it's not that we want to be excessive or we want to be these people who are go, go, go. We don't know what to do with all this pent up. You could call it anger, you could call it adrenaline, you could call it desire. And we need to find something to put it into. So whether that's exercise or whether that's education or whether that's self-help in ourselves or in our communities, we just have so much energy. And I think if it is burnout that we have today in recovery from doing the right things, well, I'll take it. I'll take it over the burnout that I experienced in addiction. Because in this one, I'm less likely to hurt people. I am less likely to cause the damage that I was causing the other way. The manipulation of your own children, the lying, the going missing, the turning off the phone, the coming home drunk, the not having enough to live a week, like at least now, you get to wake up in the morning, even if you didn't get your 8 hours, and you can look at yourself in the mirror and know that you haven't intentionally caused anybody any harm. Because as I say, we're human, and sometimes just by being in a room and having an opinion, you can be causing people harm. But the intentions are different today. And I suppose what am I looking to get from doing this podcast? I suppose I would hope that people would have a little bit more understanding of what it's like to start from scratch and how, let's remember, if you look at some 44-year-olds who didn't come from the type of areas that I came from and who have been educated and who haven't ended up in addiction or living in criminality, they might never look like, oh my God, you're doing way too much. You're going to burn out. You need to slow down, because life is probably on an even keel for these people. They got their education when they were supposed to. They never had to treat themselves for addiction and live this program to figure out how to live. So all the things that myself and people alike are doing at 44, do I necessarily want to have to do all the things that I'm doing? Some days, no. But to just get on an even keel and to get on a par with my peers, this is the work that it requires for me to feel like I have a normal life. And I hope that I always have good people around me to remind me to slow down, and that I might need a break, or I might need a rest, or I might need a couple of days off. So I suppose the message could be to maybe that person in your life that does seem really, really busy and that may see overworked, maybe to understand. Maybe she feels like, and people say you always have a choice. No, you don't. I can't live the life I want if I don't if I don't do the things that I'm doing right now. It requires me to do most of the things. There are a couple of things that I can take a back seat from, which I have done. But would I like some days to not have the pressures that I have, or to have all the things that I have to do? to just feel like I'm on an even keel in this life. I think I remember Katrina O'Sullivan, who obviously everybody knows now, that wrote the book Poor. And she talks about how people say you can be, anyone can be anyone, anybody can be anyone they want to be. And I'm sure, I really hope I'm quoting her right, I don't want to be. And that's not true. That is not true for some people who have to grow up in certain areas, in certain socioeconomic backgrounds. It's not true. We have to fight a lot harder to get to that place of, I don't know, what people call normalness in society, to have a good job, to have an education, to do the right things. I think I was in, this is actually funny, but I'm going to say it anyway. About 2 years ago, I was in, I think, 3 programs, maybe 3. I was in a program for addiction, I was in a program for codependency, and I was in a program for eating. So, I mean, that will tell you the amount of work that some of us has to do just to feel like we're normal. And I don't know what normal is. I may never know. I don't really care about about what's normal and what's not. Every person will figure that out for themselves. And I suppose burnout is the same. Each person will know when they have burnout. Sometimes other people may have to tell them, but most of the time, our body tells us, our mind tells us, because things stop working. We stop being able to think. We stop being able to do the tiny tasks. We stop being able to exercise because the body is like screaming at us and won't work anymore, as in a knee injury, a hip injury, shoulder injury, whatever it is. If we do not recognize our own burnout, if we can't think that we're about to burn out, the body will tell us, So it's about awareness around it for me. And it's about the people in our lives maybe suggesting it and say, look, you've got a heavy load. Is there anything here that you can take off the table or do less of? So I hope that made sense. I can never really remember everything I said because I'm just sort of in my own head saying it through a lived experience. And I have to finish on this. I have to finish on how much better my life is than it was. Particularly in the last 4 years. My burnout affected everybody. My mother, my sister, my brother, their partners, my children. Because the burnout then was devastation. Now I'm understanding it a bit more. There was nothing left. Burnout today, look, if you leave it, it can get, to the point of having to seek professional help. I'm well aware of that. As I say, we're human and we're still living. But the burnout that I'm feeling today, if it is burnout, I don't feel like I am. I think last year, I hope to be able to catch it before it gets to that. But I'm not ruining people's life for it today. I may just need to have to take a step back for myself. Look, I'm probably running out of things to say on it. Um, I do have one more little thing actually, just to finish up with it. Um, Hoffman, who I just spoke about in the beginning, Lena Hoffman, research highlights that constant self optimization keeps the nervous system in a survival mode. Mistaken exhaustion for purpose. Example, as long as I am moving, I am okay. I'll finish with that because what I described that happened to me last year was probably exactly what this girl found in that piece of research. There's so much in it. Have a look at it. A lot that you could argue with and a lot that you could, relate to and understand. Mistaken exhaustion for purpose. And if you think about our nervous system in survival mode, for us that has had childhood traumas and has suffered from addiction, it takes a long time to settle that nervous system. It really does. And I suppose the great thing about people like Lena Hoffman is bringing this to our attention and our awareness, but also giving people an understanding of what burnout is like and the different types of burnouts that we have. But for me now, I really enjoyed reading this. And my hope for the future is that I can stick to my new regime of exercise and spend a bit longer on the sofa, particularly at winter time, and enjoy that croissant and enjoy the coffee dates that I have and the one takeaway a week with the kids, and rather than being always beating myself up with guilt about what I should be doing because I'm trying to be a better person. I must be better. I must do more. I must improve myself. So yeah, my hope for the future. Look, I will end it here. My hope for the future is that I can recognise burnout and thank the people who have pointed out that I could be potentially leading myself there because they have seen it before with me, and to live a much more balanced life. Thanks so much for listening, and I hope I didn't waffle too much, and I hope somebody takes something from this. And I know when I finish up, I'm going to say, oh, I forgot to talk about whatever, but it's nearly an hour now, and thank you so much, and I look forward to next week. I have a couple of new people from different counties, which I'm really looking forward to sitting with fantastic stories. So until then, thanks very much.